Ooh.
Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Night Live, your favorite automotive show where we tackle the issues, the customer experience at your store, whether it's the front of the store, the back of the store, or somewhere in the middle. Doesn't really matter because the better experience they have, the more they come back to you for everything they need when they need it. And they'll bring their entire tribe, their family members, co-workers, people they go to church with, people they bowl with. Everybody will come to you because you'll be the place where people want to service their cars or buy cars. And every week I bring on the experts to share with you what they do or what they've done to improve the customer experience. And this week in our series of security series, I have Adam and Cary Johnson with us. They are experts in the field of cybersecurity and as it relates to how you do business and to protect your assets. See what nice. I did there, Adam?
Yeah, I like that.
Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Hey, how are you doing?
Why don't you introduce yourself, starting with Adam, a little bit about your background and how you got here.
Okay. I'm Adam Dennis. I run Surge Metrics. I've been in the auto space for over 25 years. First starting with a startup back in 2000, sold that. And then worked ever since, and now Surge Metrics offers a variety of services to dealers. And then because I'm an absolute freak, I also run a cybersecurity training and services program where I live in the West Indies in Antigua. And that's what brought me in touch with Cary, who now I'll hand off to.
Yeah, hi, I'm Cary Johnson. I run Fishbusters. So Fishbusters is an auditing tool that we use to audit impact when it comes to security awareness programs. So I've been doing this basically for 18 plus years now, where we actually provide an auditing layer above the security awareness platform, something that is a big gap in the industry. And that's what we do. We help you guide your program and provide you with incremental impact metrics to improve your program and to address phishing. So phishing is where most cybersecurity breaches still start, email phishing attacks and various other attacks in that regard.
Phishing, not the bait and hook thing, at least not as it relates to the stuff you catch in the ocean or in the lake.
I do both.
Is big. You do both. It's a big problem today. In automotive, we had the CDK data breach. Not that long ago, which pretty much shut down a large cross section of the country in automotive. And a lot of the newer people today, they're not familiar with doing it old school, right? When I started in this business, there were no computers. It was the pink, the yellow, and the white. Those were the three copies. One went to the customer, one stayed in the house, and the other one went to the files. The concept of figuring a lease out by hand. They can't do it today. You need a program for it. So when these attacks happen, people are literally at a loss because oftentimes they're locked out of their stuff. And in all my years in automotive, I don't remember any time where a dealership actually did a phishing simulation to protect themselves from some of the dangers that are out there. Now, in corporate America, I've worked for a couple of big corporations. This is regular stuff that they do. And I get the congratulatory emails, thank you for reporting this. It's by being vigilant, you're keeping the company and yourself safe. But at a car dealership, for the most part, that never happens, So there are companies that offer solutions, quote unquote, for this kind of stuff. And some of the things they look at, maybe they feel good about it, but the reality is they're not necessarily protecting the store, right? And one of the things that we look at or we track are click-through rates. So, Cary, why don't you explain to our audience what we mean by click-through rates as it relates to protecting the dealership or the business.
Absolutely. So a click-through rate is what you get when you run a phishing simulation. So you'll create simulations that will mimic the way that your dealership may be attacked by actual criminals. And what we do is we track metrics. We basically run it through what is basically an email marketing platform, re-provisioned to run simulations. And what it does is it will track metrics. And I'm sure a lot of your dealerships run email marketing tools. And when they do that, they'll send out an email to all of their potential clients, and then they'll get these metrics that tell them who clicked, when they clicked, and whatnot, so they know when to follow up with them as clients. Well, we do the exact same thing with phishing simulations, right? So like instead of it being an email marketing email, we send out an actual simulation disguised to look like a phishing email, right? That would be a typical example. And then we collect the phishing click-through metrics. So when someone clicks, like an email marketing, they would click to go to your website. In a phishing simulation, they would click and go to a fake page. So they've in a sense failed, if you will, right? So so we collect these metrics to give us an idea on how people react to specific scenarios, right? A lot of people also collect report rates. So there's a little button that you'll have in your interface on your Gmail interface or your Microsoft 365 interface where you'll hit the little button. Maybe it's a fish or something, and that gives you the report rate. So those are the two metrics that we will collect when we run exercises for phishing simulations.
Now, it's important to note here that current data from Verizon, 74% of all data breaches involve human error, right? So it's very important that all companies do these kinds of tests. And the test needs to be targeted, because if you have a company that you've hired to do phishing tests for you or phishing simulation, unless it's a relevant email that's sent to your employees, if it's not relevant, they're not going to click on it, and that's what we mean by false sense of security, right?
Yeah. So there are some issues with regards to the simulator platforms and the security awareness platforms that are available out there. And one of them is that they only track metrics when we're talking about simulations. They only track them as vertical disparate activity metrics related to each simulation, right? So when you run these in a series, you have no way of gauging if people are improving, if they're getting better. You're just getting a bunch of activity metrics, right? So, so there's a long story behind why they do it that way. But the big issue is that without creating a true baseline that tracks incremental impact horizontally, you don't know if your employees are improving. And it simply makes no sense to run these exercises if you have no guidance on how well they're working. It just doesn't make sense. Like if you're just running them and just hoping something's sticking and you're getting a bunch of disparate vertical siloed activity metrics, that's one thing. But what I do with my program is I create a true scientific baseline. I reset the baseline with every campaign as an auditing campaign. And then every time I run a campaign, I have a new baseline looking forward, but I have incremental impact metrics looking backwards. So I can tell you if your program is actually making a difference. So I measure impact. Platforms tend to measure activity. Does that make sense?
So are you saying that generally speaking, these phishing simulation platforms, they just look at it as a whole, and as far as how many times people click on it, they don't segment it to specific employees?
Well, no, they do that. They do that, but what they do is they'll run a campaign. Let's say a campaign with emails that are related in some way to a password reset, right? Because that's a common phishing attack.
That's a big one, yeah.
You'll get a bunch of metrics on that. The next one you run may be you've received a OneDrive document, or you've received a SharePoint document, and you'll get a bunch of metrics on that. But the two simulations are different in terms of their complexity and their contextual relevance. So you can't compare the click rate of one to the other and say our people are improving, because they're two completely different exercises. So you get a bunch of siloed metrics that speak to each simulation vertically, right? They're disparate metrics. They don't track horizontal improvement. There's no way to create a true baseline, right, where you're comparing apples to apples, so that over time you can say we've reduced our baseline by 80%. There's a lot of vendors that play this game where they say they're doing that, but the fact is they're not really comparing apples to apples. They're constantly changing the complexity of the simulation. So they're moving the goalposts around in a sense, right? So the value of each campaign itself is limited to the simulation you're using, but it doesn't track impact over time.
You know, what's interesting is that the phishing attacks seem to be more and more prevalent today than even just a few months ago. And yeah, I read something interesting. You can't be too careful, but I read something interesting that this lady was getting messages about her tolls. You know, the toll phishing thing that's going around now. You know, you're behind on your tolls, and if you don't contact us, we're going to shut down your account. The usual BS.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this particular lady was getting those, and she was deleting them, and it turned out that one was actually legit. So, and she went into her toll platform independently. You know, you never click on a link on anything.
Yep.
And that's when she found that her payment method had become disconnected from the platform. And as a result of that, she was getting these messages, which mixed in with all of the other spam messages, you know, that people get today. So can you share an example of where good click rate numbers hid a big risk?
A good click rate numbers hid a big risk?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but there is a false sense of security with the way that simulations are currently run. So one of the problems in the industry is that vendors, it's the only niche within cybersecurity where vendors self-assess their own platform, right? So they give you the simulations and they give you the measurement framework. And what ends up happening is people will either consciously or subconsciously pick the more relevant simulations early. And then as they run out of ideas, they start picking easier ones over time. So in a sense, whether intentional or not, they're creating a false trend line. So over time, while the click rate metrics may go down, it's creating a false sense of security because nothing is really actually changing, or at least the metrics aren't capturing that objectively. So it's creating a false sense of security. So you can have a low click rate, but you still have a very high susceptibility to phishing. So that kind of answers your question in a more roundabout way than a specific example, Paul, but I think you get.
So when you go in, and I'm assuming you do this with various companies, all different verticals, yes?
Most of my clients are in high risk industries, traditionally speaking. The last couple of years that's changed, but I work with like Department of National Defense, government, healthcare, finance, fintech, legal, accounting firms, where compliance and these vertical disparate metrics are not acceptable to them. So they instinctively know this is not enough. It's starting to shift now. We're seeing these weekly, there's 2 or 3 major breaches, right? So I think there's a bit of security theater going on in the industry where people were accepting these sort of disparate metrics that weren't really telling them anything, but they were getting away with it because basically, statistically speaking, most organizations weren't being breached. They weren't being targeted. Nowadays, some of these vendors, not just security vendors, but in cybersecurity in general, this security theater game is starting to get exposed a little bit because you're starting to see everyone's getting attacked, right? So now this idea of creating security theater and 99% of your clients don't get targeted is now kind of, you know, exposing the issues when it comes to actual impact metrics behind some of these vendors' platforms. So things are shifting for sure in that regard. So yeah, go ahead.
All right, we have Devendran Ramanathan. He's coming to us from Kuala Lumpur. It's 8:11 a.m. there. What a way to start your day.
So is that Monday?
Security show.
Yeah, he's ahead of us. He's a high achiever.
So now, I would imagine each industry, when you go in to set this up, the setup's got to be pretty labor intensive, no? Because you're looking at different businesses and different risk points.
Well, yeah. So I create a customized program for every client. So I have two types of clients. So let's speak to dealerships, okay? Because that would be a specific type of client. They generally would have. I'm making an assumption here. They would have a smaller number of employees, like less than 100. You'd say, yeah.
Yeah, so 70 to 100.
Yeah. So in that case, they are in a perfect situation to really optimize how they address this, because one of the things that I've learned over the years being an auditor for phishing awareness training is that nothing beats live training, right? There's a lot of vendor platforms out there, CBT training, online training, modules, cartoons, all these things. They're scalable. They're great for large organizations, but nothing beats good live training. And when you have 70 to 100 people, you can really attack that with good live training. So that's how I would address that as the training component. Then I would add my auditing layer on top of it. So generally speaking, my program sits on top of vendor platforms. It's independent of their platform. It's independent of how they run simulations, because it's meant to be a third-party, unbiased auditing of the tool, right? Okay. Because one of the issues in the industry is that vendors are self-assessing, right? You wouldn't have your managed security service provider do your SOC 2 audit, right? Like why are you allowing people to measure their own performance as a vendor? So I come in as that separate layer. But what I would recommend is for a dealership, somebody who does good live training as it relates to phishing, and then I would do the auditing on the side with the simulation campaigns the way that I do them as an auditing campaign.
I think that's a huge point there, because I do training also, so I'm in store all the time, and there's nothing like live, because you can gauge somebody's body language. You can see whether or not they're understanding the material that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And you can just stop right in your tracks and then dig deeper on it, right? Exactly. Whereas a lot of times in a dealership, if they have just virtual training, let's say, right? Let's be honest. There are people in the store oftentimes that are charged with doing the testing for other employees, right? We're doing more with less. So we've got a lot of times less employees in the building doing more work. And if you're not getting that information into that individual's head by looking them dead in the eye, there's a huge risk there. No,
exactly. But to take it a step further, the way I would address it with a dealership of 70 people is you get a live trainer, and then you break them down into smaller groups of 15 to 20, and then you do 3 sessions over a period of a week. So whoever can't make the first can do the second. Whoever can't do the second can do the third. But either way, you're addressing everyone eventually gets the training. But with my auditing layer, what I can do is I can identify who needs supplemental training, who needs the extra help, right? So with my campaigns and the way that I address it from an apples to apples comparison, so I standardize all phases of measurement. So I'm working from the true base. I'm working from a true baseline, a true scientific baseline. So my trends are actually based in science. I can break down based on the results of how people react. I can break the 70 to 100 employees into 3 categories. I can break them down into never clickers, learners who may click once or twice but do it early, and movers. And this is a dynamic trend analysis as I run more campaigns. Movers I
was going to say define each of those, particularly movers. What does that mean?
Okay, so let's say I've run 6 auditing campaigns over a 6-month period. I will do a trend analysis whereby I look at who's clicked 0 of 6 campaigns, who's clicked 1 of 6, who's clicked 2 of 6, and so on to 6 of 6. And when you do a cumulative analysis like that, and I don't want to get too complicated here, what you will find is that a very small percentage of employees are responsible for the most number of clicks. So what you end up with is 3 categories. And never clickers, they click 0 of 6, right? And it doesn't have to be 6. It'll be, at 7, we do the same thing from 0 of 7 through 7 of 7.
Hold on a second.
It's dynamic.
Are they never clickers because they never opened the email, or they've opened the email? We're tracking that they're opening the email, but they're not clicking on a particular link.
Well, either way, it's irrelevant, because what you're looking for is the movers, right? Like so the learners will click once or twice and stop. The movers will continue to click, and they'll fall into that category where they generally represent somewhere from 10 to 15% of employees responsible for over 70% of the clicks. So they will self-identify, and then those are the people that, after you've done 3 or 4 sessions to everyone initially, they get the separate sessions on, say, a quarterly basis or whatnot. So while they're getting targeted training on reducing the click rate, the never clickers and the learners, you can focus on them in terms of strategies to promote them to report phishing. So you have a trend analysis now that allows you to drive the click rate down and the report rate up in a manageable fashion with a smaller dealership from 70 to 100 people, right? Or it could be even up to 200, 300 people, but it allows it to become manageable in terms of targeting your training.
So you're cultivating your repeat offender rate list.
In a sense, yes.
It's a dynamic, it sounds to me like it's a dynamic auditing system where it morphs to, depending on which category that person is, that will lead you to how much more or what different training that particular person would need based on their activity or lack thereof. Is that correct?
Well, exactly. Because dealerships are busy places, right? You don't want to be training people if they don't need it. So your never clickers and your learners, you just pat them on the back, say, hey, when you see a fish, please report it, right? Your movers will self-identify as a small manageable group. They are the problem. They're the main problem. Those are the ones you want to focus on for training later on down the road. And then as you're running more and more simulations, which are completely non-disruptive, they take 30 seconds of your time, right? They will the movers will self-identify so that you are focusing on the optimal amount of people to drive continuous improvement, but with the least amount of operational disruption to your dealership, right? That's the idea behind a proper trend analysis. Okay. And a lot of vendors don't like to do this because they want you to think everyone's a problem. Train everybody, use our platform, send them more content, like that sort of approach. But without a strategic insight, objective metrics that are run as an independent layer, you don't really know who to target and how to optimize these tools for operational efficiency and maximum impact for your program. That's the auditing layer that I bring in to help people drive continuous improvement and focus on the right people, right?
Now, is there an AI component built into this that then automatically directs them to a particular type of training?
No, so I have an AI component that I use as an algorithm to standardize all my phases of measurement. And that tends to get a little bit complicated for this show, but basically if you're not comparing apples to apples and you're not tracking impact, that's where my AI component comes in. It standardizes all phases of measurement as a campaign, as opposed to standardizing all phases of measurement as a simulation itself. It's a very subtle difference, but anyone here that's running programs will understand that. The AI component is not necessary for a dealership because the people that you're identifying as movers, you will want to give them live training. There's no sense to identify the movers and then give them an online train. You can do that if you want. I'm just telling you what the optimal way to do it is. If you have a smaller group, live training is superior. You might as well take advantage of it in that regard, and probably cost you less anyway too in the long run.
Hey Paul, let me jump in here on 2 issues.
Yeah, I was just going to say, how do you play into this?
Well, I'm just going to take a slightly different tact. Number one, I think Cary would say that as you're working with the movers, what you want to do is take an educational approach, right? you don't want to shut these people down so that they just don't listen. You want to be able to engage them so they actually learn. So, there are some programs that are running around, and some companies have a way of handling people like that in a punitive way or some sort of diminutive way. They knock the person down. You're going to lose them, and therefore you still have not addressed your vulnerability. The second piece here is when Gary said you want them to report, right, within the company. Now, that is a good policy, but the problem is there are a lot of companies that don't have a security policy that they execute upon and make sure that their staff is trained on how to respond properly to certain circumstances, right? And they know how to handle things, whether it's a phish that comes in and they have to report it to IT to say, hey, we're getting phished, or an incident where they actually have been penetrated, and then who do they turn to? How do they handle the penetration? How do they handle that incident? Security policy, right? Your compliance and security policy that would wrap around all of this is very important too, because it gets to how do you handle that stuff within the company in a way where you're training your staff how to respond to the various situations that they might find themselves in.
Now, you work with a lot of dealers, and Mike Larkin, welcome, Mike. He's got a good question here. He says, good evening, gents. Great topic. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I don't care, and 10 being protect me now. How serious are dealers treating this threat, in your opinion?
I guess, yeah, I'll jump off there a little bit. I think there's a little too much of a formulaic approach to the response. Okay. In the sense that with the safeguards rule, right, which kind of governs how dealers should respond according to U.S. law from the FTC, if they're going about it in a way where they're meeting, I think it's 1 pen test and a couple of vulnerability assessments a year, and then so many phishing assessments. If they're going about that as a checklist, I don't think that really gets to protecting the company. Right. So, you'll hear talk about creating a security culture. Really, the only way to create a security culture and not have it be a buzzword or a buzz expression is actually when the leadership embraces it and it's in understanding it's as serious as the alarm system and all the security they have in their building when they shut it down at night. Right. If they look at it as the same thing, then they'll take it seriously. If they look at it as some checklist that they have to fulfill, then they've left themselves vulnerable. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. I know. I put 2 on Michael's on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to put it at a 2. But going back, 20 years ago or more, it was at a negative 2.
Yeah.
Right. I remember I started at a dealership, and I got my keys, and the guy's giving me the code. I said, hold on, let me get a piece of paper, my pad, so I can write down the code. He says, you won't need a piece of paper. I said, oh, what do you mean? It's 1111. I said, you're kidding, right? You have, $60,000, $70,000 cars sitting on the showroom floor with keys in the ignition, and your security code is 1111. Are you kidding? He says, yeah, don't you love it? It's so easy. Nobody's going to guess it.
Well, so here's the problem. So you still have within, like, for example, there's something called penetration testing, when you're trying to break into a system, right? And it's still the case for many people that one of the most common passwords is password 1234.
Yeah.
Right. And then there are a lot of, I'll run into a customer, I'll be talking to them, and I was like, do you have any type of password vault that you use or anything to create highly complicated passwords? No. They'll say, but an 8-character password is fine. It's like, no, man, not much anymore, especially if you're using it repeatedly. Do you know if you use repeatedly? And when you get that, they're using the same password all over the place, which the type of people that Cary deals with on a day in and day out basis that he's fighting against, those people are counting on that. They're counting on that behavior.
People don't realize that. Yeah, that's exactly the point. I don't think people realize why they need to change their password. I think a lot of people get fixated on the fact that, well, if it's easy to guess, then it's a problem. But what they don't understand is if you're using, even if it's easy to guess, even if it's hard to guess, if you're using the same one across all of your accounts, right?
You're dead.
They get breached.
So like if you get a phishing email and someone gets your password to change your Microsoft login, right? And you think, oh, now my Microsoft account is compromised. Well, it's not just your Microsoft account. If you use the same password for everything, now your bank account's compromised. Everything's potentially compromised.
Yeah, and that's what the threat actors count on, is they count on that type of misbehavior by people. I mean, to give an example, we had a customer who had an incident, and what the incident was they had someone compromise their infrastructure and be able to mimic their billing, right? And they sent a bill to a customer. The only thing that was different on the bill, everything was the same. In fact, the transmission email, hold on one second. Oh, so he's underneath the desk.
Okay.
Yeah.
We haven't seen lightning.
All right. We may get a really bad, we might get a really bad storm shortly. My wife was just saying, because I can hear the thunder.
Was that the chef?
Yes, that's the chef. So everybody, my wife is a chef. She does Caribbean cooking classes. So anyway,
Nice.
yeah. So where was I? Oh, so what happened is the threat actors were able to take over this individual's email and then download all the email, look through the email, find bills that were sent, reproduce exact replicas of the bills, and then send stuff to the customers, which resulted in hundreds of thousands of dollars in the compromise, right? And now there's one simple thing that had they done it, it would have protected them, which is MFA, multi-factor authentication.
Right. Yeah.
If they had taken their email account and at least had a reasonable block on it, right? Whether it's Google Authenticator or something else, that would not have happened. So that's the other piece of the pie, which is, in getting to the whole security policy thing, is if a dealership, their IT department doesn't say, hey, you have to have MFA for the email, you have to do this, lay it all out and base it on best practices. And there's basically tons of resources you can go to identify those best practices. I mean, Cary could go off on it, I could go off on it. It's not complicated, but a lot of companies still don't do that. So again, getting back to it, why Cary has a job, and he'll probably have a job until he has no hair left, is people continually insist, sorry, Paul, you do have a nice bald head, I'll tell you that much. But people continue to do the same stupid shit again and again and again. And unless they make it part of the culture of the company not to do stuff like that, sorry.
Yeah. You know, and what people don't understand is that there are so many breaches that happen all the time, right? Authentication is good, but also pay for a credit monitoring system that keeps an eye on data breaches and things like that. Now, companies get breached all the time. So the fact that somebody has an email or a password that they use over and over, all right, when you subscribe to one of those services, I get these emails that, hey, your password has been found on the dark web. So I don't click on anything, but I log into my program, and then I go through the threat list, and sure enough, it lists out what the passwords are that they found. Yep. And these are always passwords from years ago, because I change them regularly. And people that are, I hate to say paranoid, because it's not paranoia if they're really watching, right?
I want to go back to Adam's example there about what vendors in our industry call vendor email compromise. But to put it in layman's terms, it's basically it's vendor impersonation, right? So if a dealership has a vendor, and a hacker is aware of who that vendor is, or even makes one up and sends in a fake invoice, right? Your people in finance, you want to know. That's a perfect simulation to run, right? You want to know how will they react to that, right? And how do you mitigate that damage, right? Because multi-factor authentication is no response to that, because MFA is built to reduce potential credential theft, but it won't protect you in the case of a vendor.
It's part of a security policy. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you set a policy afterwards that requires at least two people's hands are involved in any financial payments of invoices, right? That way it's not just one person who gets an email and is fooled and sends off a payment. Right, you want to have a process behind that. But these are the types of things that simulations can kind of unearth if you do them properly, and they have the right contextual relevance. And as Adam was saying, with the dealership, that would be a perfect exercise to run.
Now, there's software that companies use, marketing companies among some of them, that you'll be able to look at somebody's website and you see what technologies they're using. So it's not that hard then to target somebody. It's no different than a blanket attack. How many people have a Bank of America account? How many people use Chase? How many people use whatever bank? So they send out in droves emails to the public saying, hey, there's a problem with your Bank of America account, and you don't have one. But a lot of people do have them, and they do click on it as a result of that.
Yeah, it's called spray and pray, right? It's not. It's the opposite of a spear phishing attack. If you send out hundreds of thousands of those, you're going to hit on 10% that actually have that account. But what's happening nowadays with AI powered tools is that they are actually sifting through OSINT, right? So OSINT is pretty much anything you put on the internet.
Open source intelligence. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But in layman's terms, whatever you put on the internet, it's Facebook,
all that public crap.
They have these. Yeah. They're gonna extract this data. And then these AI-powered tools can create compelling, contextually relevant phishing attacks, right? And they can do it at scale, right? So it's important to be aware of the types of attacks and the sophistication level. But not only that, the sheer volume that's been introduced by AI, right?
It's relentless. It's like a fire hose today.
Yeah, there's so much of it. I mean, let's face it. There's so much of it going on now that it's doing some of the awareness in and of itself. But what's happening is, there's not too many people that aren't aware of phishing nowadays, and if they're not, God help them. But what's happening is the phishing is getting so sophisticated. Like people aren't like you're talking about those toll scams, right? Like if somebody gets hit. Because AI has figured out they went on vacation. They said on Facebook they're going to say, I live in Ottawa, Canada. I'm going to Toronto this weekend, and then they get this, because there's a lot of tolls, right? AI is determined that they're going to send out a bunch of toll scams afterwards. Like the contextual relevance and timing,
right?
It all sort of creates this perfect storm where you've got something really, really formidable to deal with, and the clues aren't as obvious as they used to be either, right?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I talk to people about is just the zero trust model. Is whatever you get, whether it's from a tolling, the toll email, or from grandma, you can't trust it. You got to validate, and it sucks. It really does.
It's reality.
But it's reality. You got to validate, and getting to Cary's point, it's getting really, really, really sophisticated now. Some of these attacks. And so your best bet is if someone's trying to compel you to do something, whether it's via phone, via text, or whatever, you got to validate. I mean, we helped a dealer who, in their particular case, I mean, you remember this conversation, Paul, who got basically a phishing website was put up, which was a copy of their dealer's site. And they had a couple of people walking in to pick up cars that were purchased online, but it wasn't from their website. So there's many different ways people can get phished. And one of the things that I tend to avoid, and I don't know, Cary, if you do the same thing, is there are a lot of specialized terminology for that people use in the industry. But when you're talking to somebody at a company, let's just, in this case, we're talking dealerships, using all that terminology is distracting.
It's meant for us. It's meant for these security professionals, right? Because you want to know this type of phishing maps to this technical control, and this is how we're going to address it. But when that carries over into the actual training platform, and you're training common users with all these terms, phishing, smishing, quishing,
Forget
All
it.
these people need to know is they just need to know about scams, and they need to know what phishing is, and then they need to know about deepfakes, right?
Phishing is a scam that comes in many different ways.
I'm always looking for simple ways and effective ways to train people. So I have a 4-step process for all phishing and deepfake. And I don't want to get into that because it's a little bit complicated to just go through in 5 minutes. But I have 4 simple steps for all phishing.
You got 6 minutes. Can we do it in 6?
No, but what I will give you
Nice.
that's important is when it comes to deep fakes, right? So there's a lot of people now are starting to get deep fakes. You're even getting them from your kids, like your grandchildren.
Oh, yeah.
And they need help or something. And if you listen to security awareness traditional advice, they'll say set up a safe word with your colleagues and loved ones. And it's no one ever does that. Like knock it off, right? So here's the thing. What you do is you ask a dynamic question. And the brilliance of a dynamic question is just knowing the technique is the implementation itself, full implementation. Ask the person a question only the real person can answer, right?
Yeah. Hey, Cary, when did we first meet?
Yeah, I don't remember.
No, that's so that screwed up the whole demo I was just giving.
No. But if my daughter called and she started saying something a little bit fishy and I wasn't quite sure, I'd say, hey, how's your sister, right? And she doesn't have a sister; she only has 2 brothers. But it's a skill that you can learn and practice in case you get put into a situation where you're actually hit with the deep fake and you're like, oh, I never set up a safe word. Well, of course you didn't. Right. No one does, right? So there's a lot of little things that you can learn that will help you. And the dynamic question, think about it. Think about what would you ask your parents if they called and they were looking for help, or your kids called and they needed money or something, or they contacted you through a different account that you weren't familiar with, right? You can always verify by contacting them with another communication method or ask them a dynamic question, right?
Now, we are in the car business, so the how's your sister thing, I get that from a lot of people.
Nice.
That's just an automotive thing.
I don't get it.
Hey, Adam, you'll have to explain it to him after the show. So what do you recommend? What do you recommend as a good course of action to A, do the training, and B, do the testing and the auditing? What's a realistic best practice for something like that?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It's best practice. Like I was saying before, the cybersecurity awareness industry, the only industry in the world, the only industry in cybersecurity that we allow for self-assessment. And what you're doing is you're stepping into vendor narratives. When they're assessing their own platform, it's going to be biased, right? So the best practice is it's simple. You have your security awareness training platform. It's a lot of agnostic tools that don't run themselves. And if they're not giving you a proper framework that tells you, hey, this is working, that's not working, they don't have cause and effect with any of their metrics, well, you're just playing into their game. You're playing into what psychologists call activity bias. When we're busy, we naturally think we're progressing. Right. But you're just engaging with their platform constantly with no idea what is and what isn't working. So best practice is simply run your security awareness training program, continue to run your simulations, but use the service like mine that runs an additional audit layer built outside of the platform by design to give you that unbiased third-party perspective and incremental impact metrics. The key is incremental impact. It's constant feedback telling you what is and what is not working. It simply makes no sense to run security awareness training programs without a measurement framework that guides you on how to use tools that don't run themselves. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's something that needs to change, given the sheer volume of breaches we're seeing these days.
Hey, Cary, because I don't know if people are going to be able to pick up on this. What would a dealer need to look for if they're working with a vendor to be able to assess whether or not they have a reasonable measurement framework? And what would a baseline look like for a dealer if they're trying to assess? Because there are some services that are very well established within this space that do this type of work. How would a dealer look at it and say, hey, how are you establishing the baselines?
Well, they don't. none of the vendors do. As I said before, vendors offer agnostic tools. They don't want to be accountable for a dealership that's not going to use the tools properly. So they're only going to give you activity metrics, right? So you can look at it one of two ways. You can run their program and you can assume that you're getting somewhere. You won't have any idea. I'm the only one that really runs an auditing layer the way I do it. Now, there are some very complicated sort of scientific processes behind the NIST fish scale that some are using, but it's very, very, very complex, and it's only really used within academia. But no one is running an auditing layer today that I'm aware of. They may provide you with scripts and quizzes and focus group scripts and stuff, but those are highly subjective. They're not objective metrics. That's the difference between what I do and what's available out there.
What would objective look like?
Well, objective is a true scientific baseline where you're comparing apples to apples across the board. So every phase of measurement is standardized, and no one is doing that. And without doing that, you can't gauge incremental impact, right? So the answer is creating a true scientific baseline, and that's what my AI algorithm does, right? So it's proprietary, and so the answer is no one's really doing it, but I am, right? So,
well, I think when you say the vendors aren't necessarily giving the dealer the correct data, I think the dealer has to accept some responsibility for that as well, because in areas where they're not very knowledgeable, I think a lot of them take a hands up approach that, hey, you know what, I don't know about this. I'm just going to hire somebody, because it's easier to hire somebody than it is for me to spend God knows how many hours to educate myself on some of this stuff so that I can ask the appropriate questions to determine whether or not I'm getting my value out of my security stuff.
No, I agree. But that's the problem in the industry that I address. And the fact is, there is a gap in the industry. There is no vendor platform, whether it's security awareness training or human risk management, that can tell you if you're improving objectively from true scientific baselines when it comes to phishing simulation metrics. They simply can't. Now, security awareness is more than just phishing, right? So when you bring in someone to do the live training, right, you can take the assumption that they're learning something. It's just there's more value in knowing exactly how much they're learning. There's more value in knowing who the problem is that needs additional help. So step one is get the training done, right? It's better than nothing. But step two is to optimize the training through a proper auditing approach that actually gives you the measurement framework that tracks impact from true baselines objectively so that you know what you're doing is actually working. So if you want to take the first step, it's more of a tick the box sort of approach, but you can just make the assumption that, hey, we're better off than no training at all. But if you want to take the next step and improve the training and drive continuous improvement, you need an auditing platform.
Now, this stuff to a lot of people is a little bit fuzzy, right? I want you to explain to me like I'm a fifth grader. How do you set up, what was it I want to say here? How do I establish a real baseline? Like I said, explain to me like I'm a fifth grader.
Again, I have an AI algorithm that is proprietary, and it's a little bit complicated to explain. But the people out there that do what I do will be able to understand it this way, and it's the simplest way I can explain it.
No, but I want the people that don't do what you do to be able to understand it.
Well, yeah, it's proprietary, right? Right? You know what a trade secret is, right? You're asking me like what's the secret formula for Coca-Cola or the Big Mac sauce, right?
Big Mac sauce is more valuable. I don't drink Coke.
Yeah. It's Thousand Islands dressing. No, so what I do, I can give you a little tidbit here. So what I do is my AI algorithm will standardize all phases of measurement by campaign, not just simulation, right? And that's going to go over most people's heads. There may be a few people out there that get what I'm saying, but if you standardize all phases of measurement by campaign, meaning a series of simulations, you can create an auditing layer.
So if I understand this correctly, then each campaign is a part of the larger testing, if you will, for lack of another way to put it, that you are creating a profile on that particular company in specific areas where you're testing them and how they're responding, so that you have a better picture of exactly what they know, or what they're doing correct or doing incorrectly. And just a simple thing, like when somebody fails the phishing test, is it something that is then communicated to leadership and they handle it, or does a screen come up with a red circle buzzer thing that says you just failed this? How does that?
Well, no. When you're in a phishing simulation, generally speaking, you'll have a landing page that shows you the exact simulation you failed and where the clues were that you missed, right?
Okay.
Now, taking it a step further and using language that's threatening or throwing them into additional training every time this happens, that's not building a positive culture. There's a lot of vendors that do it. Out one side of their mouth, they're saying they're building a positive culture for you. Out the other side of the mouth, they're sending your people off to training every single time they fail a simulation, which it just doesn't make sense. With my trend analysis, what I do is I allow a roadway for staff. So the zero clickers never click, they're not a problem. Whether they're real employees or not, it's relevant. They're not the problem. The learners, if they're learning and they fail once, twice, maybe even 3 times over a long period of time, it's not a big deal, because people are going to get caught off guard. It's the movers. It's the people that consistently keep failing. They're going to move into the target zone as a manageable group. So if you're a small dealership and you're running 70 people, that group is probably going to be about 8 or 9. They're going to be the people that are going to click 80% of the time when something real comes in. You want to know who they are. Do they have administrative access? Right? Do they have keys to the kingdom? Like, do they have access to sensitive data? Are they paying invoices? These are the things you want to know. Are they in that target group for supplemental training? So those are the 3 steps. 1, train. 2, do a trend analysis and an objective audit. So you're driving continuous improvement, identify the people who need more help. And then 3, give them the right kind of help based on the context in which, on the context of the data that they have access to, right? Like if they're just someone sitting at the front desk and they just surf the internet on their own personal cell phone, I mean, who cares? But if there's someone in finance and they're paying bills, that's another issue, right?
Right.
And some companies might handle that by constraining their access in different ways. Like whether it's getting to the point that Cary said where it takes 2 people to sign off on a bill being handled or anything like that.
That's smart, I think.
Yeah. So it's not just the issue of the training and education part, which Cary's talking about, because then it gets back to that security policy and how dynamic is that policy and how you set it up, where you might have to, if you have a mover, you might have to, short of firing that person, because a lot of times some of these people might be pretty valuable to the company, you might have to make some changes to your policies. Yeah. You might have to do some policy changes where you constrain how they can do certain things. So you minimize any impact that might occur from
You take the laptop away.
You make them use MFA.
Hey, you take the laptop away and you give them a piece of slate, a hammer, and a chisel. This is it. Until you learn, you can't have access to the network.
That's one way to handle it. I somehow don't think that'll work, but go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could be a little tough on, I can be a little tough on the people.
But, here's the thing, getting back to something Cary said earlier, is spear phishing is becoming much easier now, right? Because with AI solutions, you can actually go out there and target much more effectively, whereas in the past, it would take a lot of manual labor to really research that person you're trying to target. It's much less so now. And you throw on top of that, which is, you now have phishing as a service. So you have actual organizations out there that provide software to much less technically capable people to then do attacks. It's no longer the case that you're going to have a highly sophisticated person doing the attack. You might have a bunch of people sitting in basically a business park somewhere in another country, and their job is to try to attack people, right?
Yeah. What was
So-
that movie, Beekeeper?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right.
Right? Have you seen that movie?
With Stratham, Jason Stratham, is that who it was? Yeah,
Brilliant movie. It's
Mhm.
real.
Yeah,
Yeah, Cary hasn't seen it, I don't think.
I have. I don't.
Oh,
remember
okay.
a
Yeah.
lot about it. But to your point, like the first evolution of phishing going from, full of spelling and grammatical errors and sloppy look and feel and poor
Not
crap.
anymore.
The first evolution was phishing as a service, because these platforms were actually selling these kits that were perfectly replicated phishing attacks. And then you got AI, which has now introduced a way
Brings
to
another
do
layer.
scale.
Oh,
And
brutal.
now you got AI on top of the phishing as a service. So the phishing as a service groups, these black market groups,
Steroids.
now have the power of AI. Exactly. So phishing is these days of spelling and grammatical and sloppy. You still see the odd one, but that's like, I think a lot of people are still hung up on that kind of training even to this day.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, and that's fading fast.
Yeah.
With the technology today, it's not inconceivable that these AI agents can be programmed to go after specific targets and engage them in ways that we're not really prepared for.
Yeah,
Unless we
pre-texting, you can create bots that'll have conversations with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then wait to deliver the payload later, meaning wait to deliver a link after the third, fourth, fifth, and sometimes it'll even be cross channels where they'll contact you on one channel, like through WhatsApp or something, and then the next, the link that they send, or the payload, the actual attack comes across through email or this social media platform, right? So
I click
it's
nothing.
getting crazy. What's that?
I click nothing. Even in LinkedIn, people send you, some BS, and then, here's my work, or here's my whatever. I don't care who you are or what your whatever is. I'm not clicking on it. Even people that I know, I get something with a link. I call them and I ask them, did you send it to me? And you'd be surprised how many times somebody will actually say, no, I didn't send that. I think my account was compromised. But it's not something that, they're not going to go on LinkedIn and update their status. Oh, my account was compromised. They're not going to do that.
No, but you're hitting on the main point, right? If you were to boil down any security awareness training to one simple step, it's pause to verify everything.
Yep.
Because
Yes.
cyber criminals can attack you in so many ways. They can use urgency. They can use fear of missing out, curiosity. They can use contextual relevance. They can mimic email addresses of the sender. They can create links that look real. But the one thing they cannot force you to do is not take your time and verify.
Exactly.
Like that's the one thing, right? Like if you get something from your bank, log in directly to your bank using another channel. Log in directly. You get a call from someone sounds suspicious, contact them through another means. They cannot force you to not do that. It's the one thing that you have that's in your control.
And the funny thing is, it's the simplest response you can have. It's the best, simplest strategy. And the problem is, I'm sure, in a weird way, getting to some Cary's points about some of the platforms that are out there, if really they focus on teaching that, there would be no real argument why they have to have all the different layers to what their offering is. And I don't mean to knock on anybody, but at one level, it's the simplest training you can do to really secure yourselves against basically compromise.
Yeah. And I would, don't you make that. If you need to verify, you make that outgoing call.
Yep.
Right. Don't accept an incoming call. If somebody's trying to scam you, you make that call, because it's very easy. I think that's going to be the 1-2 punch where they send you this stuff, and then a deep fake is going to call you and try to mimic you or that other person and trick them into doing it. I think that's the next step. Now I tell my wife, answer nothing, click on nothing. If you didn't reach out to them, don't respond to a response from them.
Another important point that people get caught up on, and it may sound silly, is if you get an email from your bank, don't contact. We all know don't click the link, right? But don't contact the number that's in the email, right? I'm gonna double check and call this number here. You're like look your bank number up.
Yeah, exactly. Go get the number.
Call them, right? Same thing
But
for
I-
any. Yeah.
I got to tell you guys. So as you're talking, I get on my phone, hello, your number was recommended to me by my friend. I have a question about the manufacturing industry. Ask you for advice. Have a nice weekend. That's one of those really shitty phishing
Everything.
attempts.
It's
This
probably
is-
some kind of bot. You're like, hey,
Yeah,
are you there?
as you guys were talking, it came across and I had to start laughing. Sorry.
Yeah. It's
Well,
it's
the
literally
hour has-
that prevalent now. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't think I go a single day where I don't get some simulation. Sorry, some SMS phishing text, smishing, whatever you want to call it. I don't think I go a day now without at least getting one.
Every day, multiple times a day. Well, the hour has come to an end, my friends. Last words, Adam and Cary.
Zero trust. Always verify.
Yeah.
That's great
Audit.
advice.
Audit your security awareness programs with real metrics that measure impact.
Do you have a link to your company in the after the show? I want you to put a link to your company in the comments thread.
Yeah, absolutely. But for now, if anyone wants to contact me or discuss anything, contact me through LinkedIn. I'm actually rebuilding my website more from an auditing perspective. It used to have a bit of training stuff, but now I'm just doing auditing. But contact me through LinkedIn, Cary Johnson, and we can chat. Thanks, guys. Thanks for setting this up.
All right, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
man.
To those watching live, thank you. To those watching on the replay, thank you. I hope you have a safe and successful next week. And let's see, we have next week coming up. Hold on a second.
We didn't have that ready?
We're going to be talking about fixed ops next week with Corey Smith.
There you
Be
go.
sure to tune in. The show announcement should go up sometime tomorrow. Thanks again, and gentlemen, stay on after we go off.
Take care, guys. Have a great day.
Have a great rest of your night.
All right.